And let's stick with politics. And I want to bring in Axios reporter Ursula Perano for more. Ursula, good morning. Great to see you as always. Let's talk about the significance here of Lloyd Austin being tapped for defense secretary. Really a name that kind of got a lot of traction within the last few days. As Megan mentioned, it seemed like this was Michelle Flournoy's job for the taking here. What's been the reaction so far to Lloyd Austin here, and was this a good pick for Joe Biden?
It's definitely going to be a pick that sort of appeals to make his cabinet, make his staff look like the country. Of course, Austin being the first African American to head the Pentagon would be significant. But of course, DOD and Pentagon is going to be one of the harder picks that Biden had to make, because you're going to have progressive Democrats who are going to want sort of an anti-war, sort of tone down the military complex in America leader. But some of the more conservative Democrats and just sort of independents in general are going to like somebody like Austin, who's very vetted, who did lead the command, who has years and years of experience. And so it can kind of be a cooling saucer between those two parties. But of course, he still has to get through the Senate. And surely Republicans and Mitch McConnell, should they continue to hold control, aren't going to be easy on any nominees, but I think that this would probably be one of the more palatable ones for everyone.
Ursula, Joe Biden has been getting a lot of pressure from the Congressional Black Caucus, namely James Clyburn. He's been also getting a lot of pressure from Latino groups like Ben Ray Lujan as well, to have more diversity to his staff, which is probably part of the reason why Javier Becerra was chosen for the big role at HHS, and now Lloyd Austin has been chosen for defense. Does that mean that you'll see these groups maybe be easier on Biden with other picks? And I say that because there's now a lot of talk that Tom Vilsack might return to the Agriculture Department. We've been seeing James Clyburn really try to push him for Marcia Fudge in that category.
Absolutely. And James Clyburn has been specifically pushing for Black women to make it into some of the upper echelons of Biden's administration, saying that he could picture a Black woman for almost every role. But these picks might appease some folks, but of course, every group is going to continue to fight for those who they think are best fit, and they're going to fight for their communities and their demographics, because of course, many of these roles have been led by straight white men for a very, very long time. And so it's not necessarily a sort of token check off the list, oh, we have a Black person here and a Hispanic person here. It's about really reinforcing and recreating these institutions that, of course, perpetuate issues of systemic racism. Even with Austin, military enrollment, 40% and more of it are people of color, but typically those top military roles are white men. And so having people of color and people from diverse backgrounds in these positions really helps diversify policymaking and rectify policies that perhaps did not promote those things retrospectively.
Ursula, obviously we're taking a look at Joe Biden's current cabinet right now. The other position he's supposed to nominate this week will be his attorney general. This is what he was telling reporters yesterday. Sally Yates, who used to be the deputy attorney general, she was fired by President Trump early on because she didn't want to enforce his Muslim ban. She's seen as maybe one of the frontrunners out there, maybe former Senator Doug Jones of Alabama, Jay Johnson as well from Homeland Security. Any insight on who he potentially might pick there?
All of those names you just listed are, of course, particularly of interest. Doug Jones is one that Democrats had a lot of vibe behind the past few years, and of course, they're going to miss him being down in his Senate seat. But Attorney General is also going to be one of those ones. He has to appeal to multiple groups. He doesn't want to pick somebody who's seen as a crackdown on crime type person. He wants to pick somebody who seems progressive on criminal justice reform. It'll be interesting to see the Attorney General that he picks, where they stand on issues like marijuana and sort of reducing the amount of people we have in prisons, and just some of the more low-level criminal justice issues, and seeing how those play out and sort of where their policy stances are on that.
Ursula, I want to switch gears and talk about Georgia here, because Joe Biden has now won that state not once, not twice, but 3 times now after various recounts out there. We saw President Trump at his rally over the weekend essentially declare himself the victor of Georgia. Newt Gingrich also going on cable news yesterday saying he believes that President Trump has won Georgia as well. Is this over now? Now that we've done 3 essentially counts on this, is Joe Biden officially the winner of Georgia and we can move on now? What's happening here?
I mean, I hope so. When I saw that alert yesterday, it's like, okay, yes, we kind of knew this. Of course, Joe Biden, he won the initial tally, he won the hand recount, and he won the machine recount requested by the Trump campaign. So he has gone through the hurdles. This recertification is almost just like a, hey, we actually counted these votes, reminding everybody who is, of course, up in arms And a lot of this tension around it, of course, is that there are two Senate runoff races in Georgia that are going to determine the control of the Senate. Republicans need both seats, but Georgia obviously is a state that can go blue now. And so that's a dangerous territory for the Senate. And so when there are voters who need to turn out in January for the Republicans that aren't sure if their vote supposedly matters in Georgia and if it's going to be counted correctly, there's a lot of sort of back and forth. The Trump campaign and lots of Trump allies are saying, oh, the system is shot here and my vote doesn't matter. So why would I turn out for the Senate and vote? Or why should I be so excited to vote in January if it's not actually, if it's already pre-decided? But of course, the Republican governor of Georgia, Ryan Kemp, and many of his allies and many other Republicans, Ronna McDaniel, the chair of the RNC, are trying to say, no, it's not pre-decided. Please go out and vote. Please don't let us lose control of the Senate.
Yeah, going to be so fascinating because every reporter is asking Trump supporters if they plan to vote. Yes, they think President Trump won Georgia, and do they plan to vote in January? Going to be interesting if it ends up happening. I do want to switch now to Capitol Hill, Ursula. Obviously, for the first time, it seems like we've got momentum, maybe potentially for some sort of coronavirus stimulus bill. This on the fact, yes, exactly, fingers crossed, hopefully it happens. This, of course, on top of the fact that the government runs out of funding basically Friday night. So who knows if the lights are going to stay on for next week, Ursula. Is there any chance we get a deal this week, or will we get a stopgap measure that maybe just kicks the can down the road and we do this all over again next week?
I think there's definitely a chance that we have a deal this week. I think the question is going to come down to if the $1,200 checks are in there and if the business liabilities are in there too. Of course, Republicans are pushing for these liabilities that if your place of work makes you come back to work and you get the coronavirus because you were at work, the business is not liable. That's something that's not as palatable to Democrats. And then the $1,200 checks actually aren't palatable necessarily to the centrists who just want to push the bill through, who don't want to debate, who don't want to stall anymore. But there are, of course, Democrats pushing for the 1,200 checks, the figures like Bernie Sanders. And there's even a Republican, Josh Hawley, a senator from Missouri, coming out and telling President Trump that he should veto the bill if there aren't $1,200 checks. Lots of people see these as necessary to sort of subsidize the costs incurred by the coronavirus pandemic for people who have been unemployed, for people who had to sort of live off of the unemployment, and which, of course, there were variations thereof. And so this is an idea that people think is important to put in this bill, but it's a matter of will they leave it out? Will they leave out everything they want just to get something through? Because, of course, we are so delayed on this stimulus bill, and it's so essential that we get it through, especially before we switch Congress and we have new people sworn in, we have some people going out. That sort of new delegation would make it so much harder to initially get negotiations going and really get the ball rolling.
Yeah, Congress isn't going to make it easy for us for the last couple of weeks of the year. Ursula Perano from Axios, always a pleasure, Ursula. Thank you so much for coming on this morning.